Hi girls, today I'm going to take you through how to make scones. So hopefully you'll be able to have a go at this yourself at home while we're in isolation and whip yourself up some lovely afternoon tea for you and your family. So we're going to start from the beginning, just go through some of the personal protective equipment that you need to have on or encouraged to have on while you're at home. So I've got my closed-in leather shoes on and my apron. I've tied my hair back, so it's not going to fall into the food. And the next thing before we start is we always get our hands washed. So let's get started on that. Don't forget to use soap or antibacterial liquid. And give it a good wash in between your fingers and up into your wrists, both sides, front and back, for about 20 seconds. Alright, making sure there's no germs on your hands before we start. And then we always dry with paper towel and make sure it's thoroughly dried, and then we're going to pop that into the bin. We try to avoid using tea towels for drying our hands. We use paper towels. Alright, so now we are ready. We're going to just go through the recipe and see what we need. So I've just started to get out some of my equipment over here. So for starters, we have our flour over here. So for this recipe, we're using self-raising flour. So that's always good to have on hand when you're in the kitchen. We've got our milk, and we'll need a measuring cup to measure that. Remember, we measure liquids into our measuring jugs. Then we've got some salt, and we've got some butter down here on the bench already. So for the butter, we've weighed out 30 grams. Or if you're just using a soft butter, you can use 2 tablespoons of margarine or butter. That's fine. So the next thing we have to do is, once we've got our ingredients out, we need to check we've got all of our equipment. So we already mentioned before some of the equipment. You'll need your chopping board. You'll need a big bowl to put it into and a butter knife. You need your measuring cup. And you'll need your scone cutter if you have one. If not, that's okay. You can just use a knife. And you'll need your pastry brush if you have one, and some measuring spoons as well. Now, the first thing we have to do, girls, is turn our oven on. So we need to be always careful when we're turning our oven on. Every oven is a little bit different, and when we go to school, we'll show you how to use those ones. But on my one, I'll just show you. So I've just got a button over here. So I'll turn this, and then it starts the program on, and then I'm going to have a fan on. So it's always good to have like a fan. If you have a fan, use that one. And then you can turn the temperature around to, we need it 230 for this one. So you might have a different kind of knob. So 220, I can't do 230. So I'm just going to put it on 220, and then it will start heating up, and it tells me I'm preheating my oven, which is good. But like I said, all the ovens are really different, and some ovens you need to open them up to light them. So if that is the case, I want to be at the side of the oven, not right directly in front of it as you're lighting it. So always try to keep to the side, so that if there is any accidents, that you are out of harm's way. So the other piece of personal protective equipment I need to get out, of course, is my gloves. So I need to have them handy for when I'm putting my scones into the oven and also taking them out. All right, so let's pop you back over there. So the first thing we've done, we need to get our tray organised. So it's ready to go. So I've just got a tray that's fairly small, not making many scones today. So I'm just going to use a small tray. It can have sides, or it can be a flat base one. It doesn't really matter for scones. And then the other thing that I like to use is Glad Bake. You can spray oil them, the trays, or use a bit of butter. That's a good way to do it too. Or there are even more environmentally friendly options that you might want to investigate using if you don't already have them at home. So what I do when I do the tray is, see how it's always a little bit big? We don't want any of that to hang over and accidentally catch fire in the oven. So what I do is I just fold it to fit. So I'm just folding the edge over a little bit and popping that in the tray. And then I'm just going to fold the other side down too, just to make it a bit more even. And that way we haven't got really any bits of paper hanging over the edge that could potentially cause fire. So it just fits in nicely like that. Right, we can put that to the side. And the other thing I've got out ready for later is my cooling rack. Because when they come out of the oven, put them on there to cool slightly before we break them open. So I know some of the girls in my class haven't tried scones before. So hopefully you'll get a chance to make this at home in the next little while so you can really enjoy them. There are so many different flavours you can do. So let's get started. We're going to get our self-raising flour and we need to measure correctly 2 cups. So I've got my cup measurement here. I'm just going to scoop it. I've got a big scooper here. You can use that to scoop it into. And the good thing about these is it just keeps the air rated within the scone, so it's not too dense. Then if you've got a cup that's filled over the top, what you need to do, just bring this a bit closer, get the back of your knife and just level it off. So start at the back here and just level it off nicely, and then you should have one even cup. All right, so now I've got my sifter. I'm going to pop it straight into my sifter and then repeat that process again because we need 2 cups for this recipe. So I'm filling it up nice and gently using the back of my knife to level it off. Got a perfect thing. Put that into the sifter and then we're going to move the flour away. Put the lid back on, ready to go back in the pantry later. Alright, so I've got my flour in there. I'm also going to add my salt now. I only need 1/4 teaspoon, and because I've got this one, it's the only one I've got in the pantry, it's just in a grinder. So you could measure 1/4 teaspoon, but I'm just going to take a little guess. That's about 1/4 teaspoon. It's not very much, it's just for a little bit of flavouring. And now you can go ahead and do your sifting. So this one's quite good. It's only new actually, so it's a triple sifter. So it just means it gets lots of air in there. Now when you get to the end, you might need to tap a little bit just to get all that flour out that is still stuck in the middle there. Okay? Okay, so go ahead and finish that off. Get that all out till not much else comes out. Alright, that's pretty good now. Now with sifters as well, you need to make sure that this part here doesn't get washed and underneath. So we're not going to put this one in the sink to wash up with detergent, because what happens when you're adding flour and water is you're going to get glue. And that means that all the little flour particles are going to stick into the sifter and it won't be very effective anymore. So what you need to do is just get your slightly dampened tea towel or dishcloth and just wipe it out really well underneath and both sides, and then you should be right again for next time, because it's really only having flour in it anyway. Alright, so put that aside. Just clean up a little bit around me as I go so I don't make too much mess at the end. So if there's any flour. Alright, so now we've got our bowl of flour which has been lightly sifted. We're going to concentrate on the butter now. So I've had my butter out only for a few minutes from the fridge. Hasn't been very long. It's slightly soft, but just to help it along, I'm just going to chop that into small pieces, and that will just help the rubbing process. So just into little squares. I'll show you what I've done here. So just cut that up into small squares. That will just help us rub that into the flour, okay? Put you back over there. So what we're going to do now is we need to just put our little squares into the flour and rub them in using our fingertips only. So we're trying to create a breadcrumb consistency. So I'm just breaking up my butter into the squares that I just created. Now we're going to get right in there and just using your fingertips. I know I'm a bit low down here. Let me see if I can bring you up a little bit higher. No, I have to go lower, sorry. Right, so hopefully you can see my little flour bowl there. And what I'm just going to be doing is this, with that action there. Okay, so I just need to do it with 2 hands. All right. So just using your fingertips, and you should be able to get that butter incorporated into the flour. So this will take some time, girls. So you need to be able to do this for quite like a few minutes. And you know what? I find this part of scone making really therapeutic. So it's quite good to be doing this. It's quite relaxing, actually. So if you want to spend some moments in a relaxing state and then enjoy your scones afterwards, this is the way to go. So I can still feel that some of my butter is still quite large, like look at that piece there. So I need to keep going a little bit more, and that might depend on how soft your scone butter actually is, what temperature that is, how much in advance you took it out of the fridge. So just keep going with your fingertips, and you can maybe get to the bottom a little bit more. So turn the flour over. Remember that we've sifted the flour. So we want to try to be fairly gentle with the flour, not being too rough with it, because we did all that great sifting, adding all that good air into it. And the reason why we do that sifting and adding air in is because we want our scones to be light and fluffy. We're not making biscuits or anything dense, so we need to just make sure that we're keeping everything light and fluffy. All right, so after this, we're going to get our hands a little bit clean, so we'll need to wash them throughout the practical. So we don't just wash at the beginning and then that's it. We need to keep washing them to make sure that they're free of anything that shouldn't be there, and especially it's a bit uncomfortable having the flour on your hands. Okay, so I'm nearly there. It's getting there. I'll show you the progress. So I don't know if you can see that, but you can see that it's looking fine breadcrumbs. I can still feel though, like this for example is a bit of a big blob of butter. So if you find any of those at this stage, you need to keep working a little bit more. We don't want any of those big ones in there. All right, so just have a quick check underneath, have a good feel and see if there's any more. Once you're happy with it, then you can dust off your hands, and we need to get our liquid ready, which is our milk. Okay. My oven is preheated now, so that's the beeping. So in a few moments we'll know that we're ready to go. All right, so I've just got my flour ready, so now it's time to measure my milk. So this is a jug. We need to measure our liquids always in a jug, not in a cup like we did here, because it's not very convenient to have milk that's in a cup like this, because it's really easy to spill with such a large opening. So we have a jug because it has a little spout at the beginning. Now when we measure liquids, we need to make sure we're going down to eye level. So I am looking where I'm measuring up to my 1 cup mark with my eyes in line with it. So that's really important, otherwise you might not get the right measurement. So now I'm finished with my milk. I need to pop that back in the fridge. All right, so now we're ready to add our milk. Now just be careful at this stage. We're going to add nearly all the liquid at once, but we're going to keep aside a little bit. Sometimes flour and milk can be different on different days. It depends on the weather sometimes and the type of milk, the type of flour, and maybe even how old the flour might be. So I'm just going to leave, it's probably about 1/4 of a cup, a bit less maybe, into the jug, and then if I need a bit more I can always add in a bit more and see how we go. So notice that when I'm stirring with a knife. Now that's a little bit unusual. Don't usually stir things with a knife, but for this case it's really good because it helps you cut through and keep the aeration in the scones. So we're just trying to be gentle again, like we were with the sifting and like we were when we were rubbing in the butter. Now we're trying to be gentle, and a knife just helps you cut through that in a gentle way. So let me show you as I'm going to do this. So you can see that parts are getting quite well combined together, and there's other parts at the bottom are still a little bit dry. So that means that we just need to make sure, remember to scrape down the knife, because sometimes the moisture will just stick onto that knife, and then just have another go. Make sure you're scraping right to the bottom in a cutting action. All right, now it's probably ready to do the next step. So we're going to get a little bit of extra flour and sprinkle that onto our board. So our board is just the white board. So you've been learning about the different coloured boards. And today I've just got my white one out for bakery items. So just give that a spread out so you can just see what I'm doing down here. Okay, I'll just try to balance my camera. It's a bit of a challenge. So there you go, that works. All right, so now I've got my board ready with my flour. We're going to put it on here, and just when it starts coming into a ball in your bowl, you should be able to add that onto your board. And then if it's still a bit sticky in parts, we'll sort that out. So I've just got all the mixture onto the board now. And now it's time to knead the mixture. So what that means is that we're just going to use the heel of our hand to bring the mixture together. So we're just doing this lightly and quickly. So just the heel of your hand. Okay, I'm not doing it too much. That should be good. Now, roll it over, and you should have your dough looking about like that. All right, so now we're just going to press this down until it's about 2 centimetres thick. Okay, so just a little bit more. Now, you don't need to use a rolling pin for scones because I want to keep them nice and high. I don't want them to be flat. All right, I'm just going to give my hands another wash because we've got some things sticking on there. So like I said, you're going to be washing your hands a few times, and that's all good. All right, so now we have done our scone dough. We're ready to cut. So like I said before, if you have a scone cutter, like this one has 2 sides to it, you can make a smaller one or a big one. I usually just make the small one. But if you don't have one of those, maybe you can find something else that you could use. You could even trace around a cup or use like a measuring cup and press that on to get your shape. Or you can just actually cut it with a knife and into squares, and sometimes that's a good way to do it. So what you need to do is you just press down and turn slightly, and then you'll be able to grab your scone out, and that's what they need to look like. Then we're going to pop them straight onto the tray. So have your tray handy, so just like that onto your tray. So when you're doing them, it's a really good idea if you make your scones on the tray very close together so that they can rise. You can even make them touch. So no more than a few millimetres apart, because that will just help your scones go high. Like I said before, we're trying to get our scones to be nice and tall, and the best way to do that is to make them touch in the tray. All right, so then you just keep going with your dough mix. until you have no more room. Okay. So still going, same shapes. Pop them on your tray. So some other ways you can make scones, like some people might make lemonade scones. I've heard of ones, you might have seen them in Baker's Delight, and they have like chocolate and raspberry flavour, white chocolate and raspberry or blueberry. A favourite of mine is either pumpkin or orange and date scones. They're some of my favourite flavours. So there's lots of different things. So if you start out with this recipe, it can only get better with your creativity. So once you're finished with all that mix, you just need to pull it back together again. Give it another quick knead. Just need a tad more flour on my board. Spread that out again. Okay, press it back down. Try to get about the same thickness as before. Okay, then we just need to cut them out until we use up the mix. So it's really tempting at the end to make one big scone. I would encourage you not to do that. Just try to get them all the same size, because if you do that, then your big scone won't be cooked when the other scones are cooked. So we just keep bringing it together until we've finished the mix. Trying to make sure there's no cracks in there. All right, so I've probably only got one more actually. Let me have a look. And let's see if we can form that into a scone. It might be a bit of an odd shape, but that's okay. It's a bit cracked. Let me just try again. So keep bringing that together. That's a bit better. Press and turn, and that way we've only got a small amount of waste. And you know what? I've got a little friend over here that's a bit skinny, I noticed, compared to the others. So I'm just going to put those two together. Roll it in and then push it into the mould. And see if it fits like that. We'll give it a bit of a trim. All right, then that's a better shape. Now we've got less wastage. So I've got my scones on my tray now, and I've made 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. Lucky 13. You could have got 12 or 14, about that number. So that's for 2 cups of flour. So what we need to do now is we're going to glaze them with a bit of milk that we have left over and our pastry brush. So if you've got a pastry brush, that's great. Just dip it in there and then away you go. Just brush a little bit on top. If you don't have a pastry brush, a little teaspoon or something would be fine as well. So just a little coating, and this just helps them get nice and golden brown on the top. Now they don't take very long to cook, so the good thing about scones is that you won't need to wait very long to eat them, and we do like to eat them nice and warm. So I've done that to my scones. I've got my milk on top with the pastry brush, and now I'm just going to be putting them in the hot oven, which is already preheated, for about 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to come over here into my oven space, put my glove on. Make sure you've got your gloves so you're all nice and safe when you put it in. Even though the tray's not hot, the oven racks will be. So you just open up your oven over here, and I've got a little drawer on mine, so I'm going to pull the drawer out for safety, and we just pop that in there. In the center is always good. So put that in the center of your oven, close her up. And then the next thing you need to do is probably put a timer on. So for mine, I can just press buttons here and it gives me options to do my timer. Oh, let's do 8 minutes and check them after that. That might take a minute longer. Press OK. And now we just wait. While you're waiting, you definitely should be doing some cleaning, girls. So You can be tidying up all the flour and putting that away. You can be doing your dishes. Remember, there is a document on Canvas that goes through the washing up procedure that we need to do at school. So when you are at school, there are certain things you need to wash first. It's basically the cleanest things clean and the dirtiest things last. So have a go of doing your washing up using a sink full of water, hot water with detergent, as hot as your hands will stand, and have a go of doing the washing up in that time when your scones are cooking. All right, I'll come back to you when they're done and I'll show you how they're going. Hi girls, I'm back again. So the scones are ready. If we go in our oven and have a bit of a look, we can see them in there. So let's take them out. You can even check if they're ready by just tapping them. And if they sound hollow, then you know they're ready. Or if they've just got a nice golden brown colour. So just pop them up on top of your stove, somewhere safe that is not going to be melting your bench or anything like that. So you can have a heat mat underneath or just pop them straight on top is a good spot to do that. And while you're still at the oven, don't forget to turn it off. Temperature, make sure it's all off and let that cool down. So I will just leave them in the tray for a minute because they are still quite hot. And after about a couple minutes, you can get some tongs, something safe to lift them off and put them onto your cooling rack. I'll come back in a minute after they have cooled down and I can touch them, and then I'll put them on the plate for you and show you what they look like in the inside. Okay, here we are girls with our scones cooling down on our wire rack and our finished product. You can serve it with jam and cream if you would like, or if you prefer you might just serve them with butter. And that is basically it. I hope you have enjoyed watching our crack today, and hopefully you can take up the challenge of making some scones for you and your family at home. Thank you.